Money talks, but arrogance screams. Picture standing at the threshold of luxury holding a golden ticket only to be turned away because of the color of your skin and the clothes on your back. That is exactly what happened to David Hayes at JFK's most exclusive terminal. A prejudiced lounge attendant thought she was protecting high society from a family in sweatpants. 3 minutes later, her single act of bigotry evaporated $500 million and destroyed her entire reality. Fluorescent lights buzzed high above the sprawling concourse of John F. Kennedy International Airport. But inside the frosted glass walls of the Apex Airlines Diamond Lounge, the atmosphere was entirely different. Here, the chaotic energy of thousands of stressed travelers was replaced by the soft hum of classical music, the clinking of crystal champagne flutes, and the subtle scent of expensive cedar and citrus. Standing behind the monolithic Italian marble reception desk was Brenda Carmichael. Brenda was a woman who took her job entirely too seriously. In her 14 years with Apex Airlines, she had cultivated a sharp, judgmental eye, viewing herself not merely as a customer service agent, but as the ultimate gatekeeper of high society. Her uniform was impeccably pressed, her blonde hair pulled back into a severe, immovable bun, and her smile was a weaponized expression she only deployed for old-money celebrities and executives wearing custom-tailored suits. To Brenda, the Diamond Lounge was a sanctuary, and she was its fierce protector. She prided herself on her ability to spot imposters travelers who had somehow scraped together enough miles for a one-time upgrade, but didn't truly belong in her world of caviar and private sleeping pods. On this particular Tuesday morning, the glass doors slid open, and Brenda's perfectly sculpted eyebrows instantly knitted together in deep disapproval. Walking toward her desk was a family of 3. David Hayes looked exhausted. He was a tall, broad-shouldered black man, dressed in a faded charcoal gray hoodie, a plain white t-shirt, well-worn denim jeans, and a pair of scuffed sneakers. Beside him was his wife, Chloe, wearing black athleisure leggings and an oversized college sweatshirt, her hair pulled into a messy topknot. Clinging tightly to David's hand was their 7-year-old daughter, Lily, who was dragging a bright pink rolling suitcase and clutching a stuffed, worn-out teddy bear. They had just endured an agonizing 14-hour overnight flight from Nairobi, Kenya, where they had spent the last 3 weeks overseeing the construction of a new pediatric hospital. They were tired, jet-lagged, and solely focused on getting a warm meal and a quiet place for Lily to nap before their connecting flight to London. What Brenda Carmichael did not know, what her prejudiced eyes completely failed to perceive, was that beneath the faded fabric of David's hoodie beat the heart of one of the most ruthless and successful venture capitalists on Wall Street. David Hayes was the founder and majority shareholder of Hayes Capital Partners. More importantly, he was the silent financial leviathan currently orchestrating a $500 million corporate bailout that Apex Airlines desperately needed to avoid filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. But Brenda didn't see a savior. She saw a black family in sweatpants who had clearly taken a wrong turn on their way to the budget food court. As David approached the marble desk, he offered a polite, weary smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice deep and calm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, bringing up 3 digital first-class boarding passes. "We have a 4-hour layover. I believe our connecting flights are out of gate 42. Brenda did not return the smile. She didn't even look at the phone. Instead, she slowly dragged her gaze up and down David's attire, then flicked her eyes toward Chloe and the little girl. Her posture stiffened with indignant superiority. "Good morning," Brenda replied, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet patronizing tone. "I'm afraid you are in the wrong terminal. The standard waiting areas are located back down the main concourse past the security checkpoints." David blinked, slightly confused, still holding his phone forward. "No, we're flying first class to Heathrow. Our tickets grant us access to the Diamond Lounge. Here are the passes." Brenda let out a short, breathy sigh, a sound perfectly engineered to convey absolute annoyance. She reluctantly took the phone from his hand, barely glancing at the screen before tapping a few keys on her computer terminal. She didn't bother scanning the QR codes. She didn't need to. In her mind, the verdict was already written. Sir, Brenda said, sliding the phone back across the marble as if it were contaminated. I don't know where you purchased these tickets, but our system is highly secure. This lounge is strictly reserved for our Diamond Elite members and verified first-class ticket holders. It is not open to the general public, and we certainly do not honor third-party discounted vouchers. Chloe stepped forward, her brow furrowing. Excuse me. We didn't use vouchers. My husband booked those directly through the airline. If you would just scan the barcode. Ma'am, I do not need to scan anything. Brenda interrupted, her voice rising just enough to draw the attention of a nearby businessman sipping an espresso. I have worked this desk for a decade. I know our clientele, and I know when someone is attempting to game the system. Lily tugged at David's hoodie. Daddy, are we not allowed in? I'm hungry. David gently squeezed his daughter's hand, reassuring her. His polite, exhausted demeanor was rapidly evaporating, replaced by the razor-sharp focus that made him a titan in the boardroom. He looked Brenda directly in the eyes. I'm going to ask you politely one more time. David said, his voice dropping an octave, losing all its previous warmth. Scan the tickets, look at the names, and let my family walk through those doors. Brenda crossed her arms over her chest, a smug, defiant smirk playing on her lips. And I'm telling you, sir, that people like you are not welcome in the Diamond Lounge. Now I suggest you take your family and your luggage back to the main terminal before I am forced to take further action. The air around the marble desk turned to ice. The phrase, people like you, hung heavily in the space between them, a thinly veiled dagger of racial and class prejudice. Chloe's jaw clenched. The fatigue of the long flight vanished, replaced by a fierce maternal anger. People like us, she challenged, stepping right up to the desk. Care to clarify exactly what that means? Brenda didn't flinch. Emboldened by years of unchecked authority behind her little marble fortress, she leaned in closer. It means, ma'am, that this is a private sanctuary for Apex Airlines' most valued investors and VIPs. It is a place of decorum. It is not a waiting room for people who look like they just rolled out of bed and decided to try their luck at an upgrade. Your presence is disrupting the atmosphere of our lounge. David placed a gentle hand on his wife's arm, silently urging her to step back. He had faced bigotry in 1,000 different forms throughout his ascent to the top of the financial world. He knew exactly how this game was played, and he knew exactly how it ended. Brenda David said, reading her gold-plated name tag. Let me explain something to you. I am well aware of the policies of the Diamond Lounge. In fact, I am intimately familiar with the operational guidelines of this entire airline. If you scan that boarding pass, you will see the name David Hayes. You will also see a black insignia next to my frequent flyer number, indicating that I am not just a first-class passenger, but an Apex Chairman's Circle member. Brenda let out a sharp, condescending laugh. Chairman's Circle, please. There are only 50 Chairman's Circle members in the entire world. They are CEOs. They are dignitaries. They do not stand at my desk wearing stained sweatshirts and arguing with staff. It's dust from a construction site in Nairobi, David corrected quietly, and you are currently making the biggest professional mistake of your life. The quiet authority in David's voice grated on Brenda's nerves. How dare this man speak down to her? She was the gatekeeper. She held the power. She reached under the counter and pressed a red button hidden beneath the keyboard, the silent alarm meant for unruly or dangerous passengers. Vde Tiri. I have asked you to leave, Brenda said loudly, ensuring her voice carried into the lounge so the wealthy patrons could see her efficiently handling a threat. You are now trespassing, you are causing a public disturbance, and you are harassing airline personnel. If you do not vacate the premises immediately, you will be escorted out, and I will personally see to it that you are placed on the Apex Airlines no-fly list. Daddy, I want to go, Lily whispered, a tear rolling down her cheek. The hostility of the strange woman behind the desk was terrifying her. David knelt down, completely ignoring Brenda, and wiped the tear from his daughter's face. It's okay, sweetie. We're not going anywhere. Daddy's just going to fix a little problem. He stood back up just as the heavy glass doors to the concourse swung open. Two airport security officers clad in high-visibility vests and tactical belts marched briskly toward the desk. "Is there a problem here, Ms. Carmichael?" the lead officer, a burly man named Officer Miller, asked. He rested his hand casually on his radio, his eyes darting suspiciously toward David. "Yes, Officer Miller," Brenda said, pointing an accusatory finger at David. "This man and his family are attempting to force their way into the VIP lounge using fraudulent tickets. When I denied them entry, he became belligerent and began threatening me. I need them removed from the terminal immediately." Officer Miller turned to David, puffing out his chest. "All right, sir. You heard the lady. Gather your things. We're taking a walk." David didn't move an inch. He looked at the two officers, then back to Brenda, who was practically glowing with triumphant satisfaction. She had won. She had put those people in their place. "Officer," David said calmly, "I suggest you check the security cameras before you lay a hand on my family. I have not raised my voice. I have not made a single threat. I simply asked this woman to scan my valid first-class tickets, which she refused to do based on her own bigoted assumptions." "He's lying," Brenda snapped. "He's an aggressive squatter. Remove him." "Sir, I'm not going to ask you again," Officer Miller growled, stepping closer and reaching out to grab David's arm. "Don't touch him," Chloe warned, her voice vibrating with intensity. David held up his right hand, a gesture of absolute unyielding command that stopped the officer in his tracks. "Before anyone does anything," David said, his eyes locking onto Brenda's, "I'm going to make one phone call. After that, if you still want to throw us out, you can try." Brenda rolled her eyes, scoffing dramatically. "Oh, please. Who are you going to call? Customer service? Go right ahead. You'll be on hold for an hour." "No," David said softly, pulling his phone from his pocket. "I'm calling the man who signs your CEO's paychecks." David unlocked his phone and bypassed his contacts, dialing a direct encrypted number. The lounge lobby was dead silent, save for the soft classical music still piping through the overhead speakers. The security guards hesitated, confused by David's utter lack of fear. Brenda crossed her arms, a smirk of total disbelief plastered on her face. The call connected on the first ring. "David, tell me you're back stateside," a sharp, energetic voice answered on the other end. It was Richard Grayson, the chief operating officer of Hayes Capital Partners. "I'm at JFK, Richard," David said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. "And we have a problem. I'm currently standing at the front desk of the Apex Diamond Lounge, being threatened with security and denied entry, because a gate agent named Brenda Carmichael doesn't believe a black man in a hoodie can afford a first-class ticket." There was a heavy pause on the line. When Richard spoke again, his tone had shifted from friendly to lethal. "Are you joking?" "I wish I were," David replied, keeping his eyes fixed on Brenda, whose smirk was beginning to falter slightly. "I want you to pull the Apex deal." Brenda let out an audible scoff. "The Apex deal? What was he talking about?" "DB." "David, wait," Richard said over the phone. "The ink is practically dry. The board finalized the terms at midnight. It's a $500 million capital injection. If we pull out now, the market will slaughter them. They are over-leveraged by $1 billion. The news will trigger an algorithmic sell-off. Their stock will plummet before the ink on our withdrawal is even printed. I know exactly what will happen." Richard assured David said coldly, "A company's culture starts from the top and bleeds down to its front lines. If this is how Apex Airlines treats its customers, they do not deserve Hayes Capital's money. Liquidate our existing 15% stake immediately. Kill the merger. Release a press statement to Bloomberg and Reuters right now, stating that Hayes Capital is withdrawing all funding due to irreconcilable differences in corporate values and severe management failures." "Understood," Richard said, the sound of furious typing echoing in the background. "Consider it done. It's going to get bloody, David." "Let it bleed," David said, and ended the call. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked at Brenda. 3 minutes, he said quietly. "Are you quite finished with your little theatrical performance?" Brenda sneered, though a tiny sliver of doubt was beginning to worm its way into her stomach. "Officer Miller, please remove this man. He's obviously delusional." But exactly 200 miles away, in a glass skyscraper in Manhattan, Richard Grayson had just hit send on a priority terminal command. Minute 1. In the high-frequency trading floors of Wall Street, automated algorithms are designed to react to news in fractions of a millisecond. When the official press release hit the wire, Hayes Capital abandons $500 million. Apex Airlines bailout cites severe corporate failures. The machines reacted. Apex Airlines. APX had opened the morning at $42.50 a share, buoyed by rumors of the impending cash injection. Within 60 seconds of the announcement, 3 million shares were dumped. The stock dropped to $38. Minute 2. Human traders caught up with the machines. Panic set in. Apex Airlines was notorious for its massive debt. The Hayes Capital deal was their only lifeline. Without it, bankruptcy wasn't just a possibility, it was a certainty. Inside the Diamond Lounge, the atmosphere shifted. A silver-haired businessman sitting near the window suddenly gasped, staring at his iPad. "Good God," he muttered. Across the room, a hedge fund manager's phone began to vibrate violently. Then another phone rang. Then another. The quiet sanctuary of the lounge erupted into a chorus of frantic ringing and alarmed voices. A PX stock hit $31. Minute 3. Behind the marble desk, Brenda's computer monitor, which always displayed a small ticker of the company's stock in the bottom right corner, flashed violently in red. A PX $24.10, down 43%. Over $500 million in market capitalization had been entirely vaporized in 180 seconds. Brenda stared at the red numbers, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of her neck. What is happening?" she whispered, frantically clicking her mouse. Before David could answer, the frosted glass doors of the lounge's inner office violently swung open. Arthur Pendleton, the regional vice president of guest relations for Apex Airlines, burst out into the lobby. His suit jacket was half off, his tie was crooked, and his face was completely drained of blood, making him look like a walking corpse. He was clutching a tablet to his chest as if it were a shield. He sprinted past the confused security guards, nearly slipping on the polished marble floor. "Mr. Hayes!" Arthur gasped, his voice cracking with sheer panic. "Mr. David Hayes, please, my God, please tell me this is a misunderstanding." Brenda's jaw dropped. She looked from her trembling, terrified boss to the man in the dirty gray hoodie. Arthur," David said smoothly, his voice echoing in the suddenly quiet lobby. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Unfortunately, there's no misunderstanding. Your gate agent here, Brenda, informed me that people like my family are not welcome in your establishment. So I decided to take my family and my $500 million elsewhere." The silence that followed was deafening. Brenda Carmichael, the self-appointed gatekeeper of the elite, slowly turned her head to look at David Hayes. The blood drained from her face as the horrifying, life-altering reality of what she had just done finally crashed down upon her. Silence descended upon the marble reception area of the Diamond Lounge, so absolute and suffocating that the distant roar of a jet engine outside felt entirely disconnected from reality. Arthur Pendleton stood frozen, his tablet trembling in his grip, staring at David Hayes. The blood rushing in Arthur's ears sounded like a freight train. He was a man who had spent 20 years climbing the corporate ladder of Apex Airlines, surviving mergers, fuel crises, and union strikes. Yet, looking into the calm, unyielding eyes of the venture capitalist standing before him, Arthur knew his career and the company he dedicated his life to was currently hanging by a frayed, microscopic thread. "Mr. Hayes," Arthur stammered, swallowing hard. His throat was suddenly as dry as sandpaper. "David, please, we have been preparing for your arrival all week. The executive team was tracking your flight from Nairobi. We had a private suite reserved for you and your family. I just stepped into the back office to take a call from our chief financial officer regarding the final wire transfers." David offered a tight, humorless smile. It seems your preparations failed to include the front desk, Arthur. Your gatekeeper made it abundantly clear that my family's presence was a disruption to the decorum of your establishment. She even went so far as to summon security to have us physically removed for trespassing. Arthur whipped his head around to stare at Officer Miller and his partner. The two security guards, realizing they had just aggressively threatened a billionaire who was in the process of buying the airline, looked as though they had swallowed live grenades. Officer Miller immediately unhanded his radio, took 3 distinct steps backward, and raised his hands in a gesture of absolute surrender, violently shaking his head to distance himself from the situation. "We were just responding to a distress call, Mr. Pendleton," Officer Miller said quickly, his voice cracking. "Ms. Carmichael stated there was a hostile vagrant trying to force entry with fake tickets. We didn't know." Arthur's gaze slowly shifted to Brenda. Brenda Carmichael looked as though the floor beneath her Italian marble desk had just opened up to reveal the depths of hell. The arrogant smirk that had previously defined her face was entirely eradicated, replaced by a ghastly translucent pallor. Her meticulously applied makeup now stood out in harsh contrast to her bloodless skin. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white, desperately trying to anchor herself as her world spun violently out of control. "Brenda." Arthur whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of terror and a rapidly boiling, unadulterated rage. "What have you done? Tell me exactly what you did." I... Brenda stuttered, her eyes darting frantically between Arthur David and the flashing red numbers on her computer monitor that indicated Apex Airlines' stock was still plummeting. "Arthur, look at them. He's in a dirty sweatshirt. They look like they belong in economy. He showed me a digital pass, but I assumed it was a screenshot, a glitch in the system. You know how strict the VIP policies are. I was protecting the lounge. Chloe Hayes stepped forward, her voice slicing through the air like a silver blade. She was no longer just a tired mother. She was a woman demanding accountability. "You didn't ask a single question. You didn't scan the boarding passes. You took one look at my husband's skin color, my daughter's hair, and our comfortable clothes, and you instantly branded us as criminals. You didn't protect anything. You projected your own pathetic prejudice onto us." "That's not true," Brenda cried out, her voice pitching into a hysterical squeak. "I am not prejudiced. I am a professional. I follow the rules, Mr. Pendleton. You know me. I've been here 14 years. And in 14 seconds, you destroyed everything," Arthur hissed, slamming his hands down on the marble desk so hard the sound echoed throughout the terminal. "This man is David Hayes, founder of Hayes Capital. He is the sole reason this airline was going to make payroll next month. He is a Chairman's Circle member, and you treated him like trash." Brenda shrank back, tears of pure selfish panic welling in her eyes. "Mr. Hayes, please," she begged, looking at David with trembling lips. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I've been working back-to-back shifts. I was stressed. I'll scan the tickets right now. Please, I have a mortgage. You can't just destroy the whole company over a misunderstanding at the front desk." "I didn't destroy the company, Brenda," David replied, his tone remaining terrifyingly calm. He reached down and picked up Lily's stuffed bear, which she had dropped in the commotion, handing it back to his daughter. "Your corporate culture did. A business is only as strong as its weakest point of contact. If an organization empowers its employees to treat people with such blatant disrespect based on superficial profiling, then that organization is fundamentally broken. Hayes Capital does not invest in broken, toxic assets." Arthur was hyperventilating now. His phone, tucked in his breast pocket, began to ring frantically. The custom ringtone belonged to the CEO. Arthur ignored it. He looked at Brenda, his face twisting with absolute disgust. "Give me your badge," Arthur demanded, holding out a shaking hand. Brenda gasped, covering her mouth. "Arthur, please." "I said, give me your security badge, your lanyard, and your terminal keys," Arthur screamed, losing every ounce of his corporate composure. You are fired, effective immediately. You are blacklisted from this airport, and I will personally ensure that every major carrier in the Oneworld and SkyTeam alliances knows exactly why you were terminated. Hand it over." With trembling manicured fingers, Brenda unclipped the golden Apex Airlines badge from her lapel. She dropped it onto the marble counter. The small clack of the plastic hitting the stone sounded like a gavel falling in a courtroom. She had reigned over this desk for a decade, sneering at thousands of people she deemed unworthy. Now she was stripped of all her power, reduced to nothing in front of an audience of the very elites she had tried so desperately to impress. Weeping openly, her severe bun coming undone, Brenda backed away from the desk, turned, and fled down the concourse, pushing past the confused travelers who had stopped to watch the spectacle. Arthur grabbed the badge and shoved it into his pocket, turning back to David with a look of desperate pleading agony. "Mr. Hayes, she is gone. The cancer has been removed. Please, I am begging you on behalf of 80,000 Apex employees worldwide. Call your office. Reverse the press release." David looked at the panicked vice president, his expression unreadable. "Firing the weapon doesn't unshoot the bullet, Arthur. Your problems are just beginning." Arthur's phone continued to ring relentlessly. The vibrations were visibly shaking his suit jacket. "Answer it," David instructed softly. "It's Harrison, isn't it?" Arthur gulped and pulled the device from his pocket. The caller ID flashed Harrison Cole, CEO. Arthur's thumb hovered over the green button. He looked at David like a condemned man looking at the executioner. Slowly, he accepted the call and put it on speakerphone, holding it up between them. "Arthur." Harrison Cole's voice exploded from the tiny speaker, frantic, distorted, and dripping with sheer terror. "What the hell is happening down there? Did Hayes not show up? Did the wire fail? CNBC is reporting that Hayes Capital just dumped our entire 15% stake. Our stock has been halted by the SEC because of the volatility. We lost $500 million in market cap. Tell me this is a sick joke." "Harrison." David spoke toward the phone, his voice echoing in the silent lobby. "It is not a joke. It is the reality of your current leadership." There was a dead, horrifying silence on the other end of the line. The sound of Harrison Cole drawing a shaky breath was perfectly audible. "David!" Harrison's voice dropped an octave, shifting instantly from panicked screaming to a tone of sickeningly sweet groveling. "David, my God, you're there. Thank heaven. David, listen to me. Whatever the issue is, we can fix it. Whatever happened, I will personally rectify it. Just tell Richard Grayson to issue a correction. Tell the press it was an automated error. Please, David. The board is convening an emergency meeting right now. They're talking about Chapter 11 filing by noon." "I am aware of what the board is discussing, Harrison, because my team initiated the collapse," David replied coldly. 10 minutes ago, I attempted to enter your flagship lounge with my wife and daughter. Your gate agent not only refused to scan our first-class tickets, but she also explicitly stated that people like us do not belong here before calling airport security to have us removed as hostile vagrants. "Oh my God," Harrison whispered through the speaker. The sound was one of utter devastation. "It seems, Harrison, that your staff is under the impression that wealth and dignity only look a certain way," Chloe interjected, leaning toward the phone. "And if this is the standard of training and customer service you tolerate at your flagship terminal, we have zero interest in trusting you with our capital. We will not fund a company that treats people like second-class citizens. May Mrs. Hayes please accept my deepest, most profound apologies?" Harrison pleaded, his voice cracking. "I am absolutely sickened to hear this. That agent does not represent our values. We will terminate her. I already fired her, Harrison." Arthur chimed in, sweat pouring down his forehead. "She's gone. Security badge surrendered." "Good," Harrison practically yelled. "David, she's gone. You see swift action. We will implement mandatory sensitivity training across the entire global network. I will personally fly out to London tonight and formally apologize to you and your family over dinner. Just please call off the dogs. If this stock halt lifts and you haven't issued a retraction, we are finished. The airline goes under." David folded his arms. Sensitivity training is a corporate band-aid for systemic rot, Harrison. You think firing one bigot solves the problem? The fact that she felt comfortable enough to speak to us that way in front of a lobby full of people means she felt protected by your system. Just then, a heavy, authoritative throat-clearing sound broke the tension. From the inner doors of the Diamond Lounge, stepping out of the frosted glass sanctuary, came the silver-haired businessman who had been sitting near the window. He was a distinguished-looking man in a bespoke navy pinstripe suit, holding a gold-tipped cane. Arthur's eyes went wide. Mr. Gallagher. Winston Gallagher was not just any passenger. He was a legendary corporate raider, a titan of the aerospace industry. And crucially, he held a massive 8% personal stake in Apex Airlines. He was also a senior voting member of the Apex Board of Directors. Gallagher walked slowly toward the marble desk, his eyes fixed on the phone in Arthur's hand. He stopped next to David, offering the younger man a curt, respectful nod. "Harrison, are you on the line?" Gallagher barked, his voice raspy and commanding. "Winston." Yes, I'm here. "Winston, please tell me you can help reason with Mr. Hayes." "Ida, shut your mouth and listen to me, Harrison." Gallagher snapped, entirely abandoning any professional courtesy. "I watched the entire altercation through the glass. I watched that arrogant desk agent humiliate this family. I watched security try to put their hands on a man whose only crime was wanting to feed his daughter. And I watched you, Harrison, allow the culture of this airline to deteriorate into a cesspool of elitist garbage over the last 3 years. Winston, that's not fair." "I said shut your mouth," Gallagher roared, slamming his cane against the marble floor. "Mr. Hayes is absolutely right. The rot starts at the top. You built a culture that values the appearance of wealth over actual human decency. And now you've cost us everything." Gallagher turned to David, his expression softening into one of genuine professional respect. "Mr. Hayes, I have followed your career for a long time. Your investments built hospitals in Africa and revitalized domestic manufacturing here at home. You are a builder. Harrison Cole is a parasite who only cares about quarterly bonuses. If you reinstate the bailout, I will convene the board and initiate a vote of no confidence against Harrison Cole immediately. I will have him removed as CEO before your flight lands in London." Through the speakerphone, a sharp, suffocating gasp was heard. "Winston, you can't do that," Harrison cried out. "I have the votes, Harrison, and you know it," Gallagher said ruthlessly. "You are done." Gallagher looked at David. "I will personally take over as interim CEO. We will gut the executive suite. We will restructure the entire customer relations department from the ground up, with Hayes Capital having direct oversight on the new diversity and inclusion mandates. But I need you to reverse that press release, David. We have 80,000 employees who don't deserve to lose their pensions because of a bigoted gate agent and an incompetent CEO. David looked at Gallagher, then down at his daughter Lily, who was clutching her bear wide-eyed at the intense adults surrounding her. He looked at Chloe, who gave him a small, affirming nod. They weren't interested in destroying the livelihoods of thousands of innocent pilots, mechanics, and flight attendants. They just wanted the poison removed. David pulled his own phone from his pocket and hit redial on Richard Grayson's number. "Richard Aquarium," David said when the line connected. "Draft a new press release. Hayes Capital is reinitiating the Apex acquisition on amended terms. The bailout is contingent upon the immediate resignation of the current CEO, Harrison Cole, and a complete restructuring of the executive board. Release it to Bloomberg now." "You got it, boss. Market opens back up in 4 minutes. This will catch the bounce," Richard said, typing furiously. David hung up. He looked at the phone in Arthur's hand. "Harrison, you have exactly 4 minutes to clean out your desk. Goodbye." David reached over and tapped the red end call button on Arthur's screen. The line went dead. The heavy silence returned to the lobby, but the oppressive tension had broken, replaced by the electric crackle of a corporate coup d'etat that had just taken place over a marble reception desk. Arthur Pendleton stood completely frozen, still holding his phone, processing the fact that his CEO had just been ousted. The company was saved, and the man standing in front of him now effectively owned the airline. Winston Gallagher let out a heavy sigh, leaning on his cane. "Brutal," he muttered, "but necessary. It's an honor to do business with you, Mr. Hayes. I'll see you in the boardroom next week. In the meantime, please allow me to personally escort your family into the lounge. You look like you could use a drink and your daughter needs a proper meal." "Thank you, Winston," David replied, the cold steel finally leaving his voice, replaced by genuine weariness. As they walked past the deserted reception desk and through the frosted glass doors, the atmosphere inside the Diamond Lounge was chaotic. Executives were furiously whispering into their cell phones, glued to the financial news networks playing on the large flat screens. But as David, Chloe, and Lily walked in, accompanied by Gallagher and a highly subservient Arthur Pendleton, the room went dead silent. Every eye turned to the Black family in sweatpants. But there was no longer any judgment in their stares. There was only awe, fear, and profound respect. The financial titans in the room knew exactly who David was, and they knew what he had just done. He hadn't just proven he belonged, he had proven he owned the room. Arthur scrambled ahead, desperately trying to salvage his own job. He ushered them to a private, secluded suite in the back of the lounge overlooking the tarmac. Within 60 seconds, an army of lounge attendants, terrified and hyper-attentive, swarmed the table. They brought warm, scented towels, plates of fresh fruit artisan pastries, and a massive custom-made chocolate milkshake for Lily. "Is this better, sweetie?" Chloe asked, brushing a lock of hair from Lily's forehead as the little girl happily sipped her milkshake. "Yes, Mommy." Lily beamed, her fear of the mean lady entirely forgotten in the face of excessive chocolate. David leaned back in the plush leather chair, finally allowing the exhaustion of the Nairobi trip to catch up with him. He took Chloe's hand and squeezed it. "Sorry about the detour," he murmured. "Don't apologize," Chloe said fiercely. "She needed to be stopped. If she treated us that way, imagine how she treated people who didn't have the power to fight back." Before David could respond, his phone buzzed. It was Richard. "Text boss. Check Twitter. You're trending." David frowned and opened the X app on his phone. The top trending hashtag worldwide was hashtag Apex Airlines, followed closely by hashtag Brenda the Bigot and hashtag Karma. David clicked the top video. It was a shaky, high-definition clip shot from a smartphone. A college-aged traveler who had been sitting in the seating area just outside the lounge had recorded the entire interaction. The video captured everything: Brenda's sneering face, her vicious words. "People like you are not welcome. Look like you just rolled out of bed. General public." It captured Officer Miller moving in to grab David, and it captured David's cold, calculated destruction of her reality. The clip already had 12 million views and climbing. The comments were a bloodbath. User 1. Did that desk agent really just try to flex on a billionaire? The racism leaped out and bit her own head off. User 2. 3 minutes to ruin her own life. A masterclass in minding your own business. User 3. The way the VP ran out looking like he saw a ghost lemon. Ooh. Stock went from $42 to $24 in the time it takes to microwave a hot pocket. The PR department of Apex Airlines was already in absolute meltdown mode. Their official social media accounts were rapidly posting statements confirming the termination of the employee, the resignation of the CEO, and their newfound commitment to diversity and inclusion, completely capitulating to the public pressure that was mirroring the financial pressure David had applied. Justice hadn't just been served in the shadows of a boardroom, it had been broadcast to the entire world. Brenda Carmichael wasn't just fired, she was internationally disgraced. 30 minutes later, an Apex Airlines concierge gently approached their private suite. "Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes, your flight to London Heathrow is ready for boarding. If you'll follow me, we have a private golf cart ready to take you directly to the gate, bypassing the main concourse." They gathered their belongings. As they walked through the lounge, the patrons literally parted like the Red Sea. No one said a word. When they arrived at Gate 42, the chaotic boarding process was entirely paused. The gate agents stood at attention. David, Chloe, and Lily walked down the jet bridge, the captain of the Boeing 777, was standing at the door of the aircraft, his hat tucked under his arm. "Mr. Hayes," the captain said, offering a crisp salute and a warm smile. "Welcome aboard. It is a profound honor to have you flying with us today. We have the first-class cabin fully prepped for you. If there is anything, and I mean anything at all, that you require during this flight, you send word directly to the flight deck." "Thank you, Captain," David said softly. "We just want to sleep." They settled into their massive lie-flat private suites. The flight attendants, who had undoubtedly heard the news of the massacre at the Diamond Lounge, practically tripped over themselves to provide impeccable service as the heavy cabin doors closed and the plane pushed back from the gate. David looked out the window at the sprawling expanse of JFK Airport. He thought about Brenda Carmichael likely sitting in her car in the employee parking lot, her career over her reputation, destroyed her pension, likely frozen in the ensuing corporate chaos. She had tried to exercise her tiny sliver of power to belittle a family based on her own vile prejudices. In return, she had unwittingly summoned a financial leviathan that swallowed her world whole. The plane accelerated down the runway, pushing David back into his seat. As they lifted off into the sky, leaving the noise and chaos of New York behind, David closed his eyes. The market was recovering, the airline was saved, and a very clear message had been sent. Power didn't look like a bespoke suit or a pretentious attitude. Real power was quiet. It wore a faded hoodie, and it struck only when provoked. And when it struck, it left absolutely nothing but ash in its wake. Cruising at 40,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, the Boeing 777 was a marvel of modern aviation. But inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere was a sanctuary of profound, insulated silence. David Hayes sat in his plush, lie-flat leather suite, staring out the oval window at the endless expanse of stars. The gentle hum of the Rolls-Royce engines provided a soothing white noise, a stark contrast to the absolute financial and public relations hurricane he had just unleashed on the ground. Chloe was asleep in the suite next to him, wrapped in a heavy cashmere airline blanket. Lily was curled up in her own pod across the aisle, softly snoring, her stuffed bear clutched tightly against her chest. They were safe. They were respected. But David's mind was still running through the complex variables of the corporate takeover. His encrypted satellite phone, resting on the polished mahogany tray table, vibrated. The caller ID glowed softly in the dimmed cabin light. Winston Gallagher. David picked it up, pressing it to his ear. "Winston, I assume the blood on the boardroom floor has been mopped up." A raspy, exhausted chuckle echoed through the receiver. "We needed a few extra mops, David, but yes, the deed is done. Harrison Cole formally submitted his resignation 20 minutes ago. We didn't even give him the courtesy of clearing out his desk. Security packed his office into cardboard boxes and escorted him through the service elevator. The board officially appointed me as interim CEO until your team at Hayes Capital selects a permanent replacement. Your revised wire transfer cleared. Apex Airlines will survive the week. And the stock," David asked, his voice remaining low so as not to wake his family. "The SEC lifted the halt 15 minutes before the closing bell." Gallagher replied, a hint of awe in his voice. "When the news of Harrison's ousting and your revised strict oversight mandate hit Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal, the market reacted violently in the opposite direction. We didn't just recover the $500 million we lost during your little 3-minute fire drill. The stock surged past our opening price. We closed at $46 a share. Wall Street loves a house cleaning, especially when you are the one holding the broom. Be ishit pat. Make sure Richard Grayson gets a copy of the internal flight manifests and the employee rosters," David instructed. "We are going to conduct a top-down audit of your entire human resources department. If Brenda Carmichael was bold enough to act that way in the open, she wasn't an anomaly. She was a symptom. We are going to find every manager who enabled that culture and excise them." "Agreed," Gallagher said firmly. "Have a safe flight, Mr. Hayes. London will be waiting for you." While David secured the future of a global aviation empire from the stratosphere, Brenda Carmichael was experiencing the rapid, terrifying disintegration of her entire life on the ground. She sat in the driver's seat of her leased luxury sedan in the remote employee parking lot of JFK, the engine off the interior plunged into darkness. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. The golden Apex airline security badge was gone, leaving a heavy physical emptiness on her lapel. Her phone lay in the passenger seat, vibrating incessantly. It had not stopped for 3 hours. Brenda finally reached over and picked it up. Her screen was a relentless cascade of notifications, text messages from coworkers, emails from HR, but worst of all, the social media alerts. The video recorded by the college student had bypassed viral status and entered the realm of a global cultural phenomenon. It had been picked up by CNN, Fox News, and the BBC. She opened Twitter. The hashtag Brenda the Bigot was still trending #1 worldwide. She clicked on a news article from a prominent online publication. The headline made her physically nauseous gatekeeper to the unemployed: how one Apex Airlines agent ruined her life and crashed a stock in 180 seconds. She scrolled through the comments, tears streaming down her ruined makeup. The internet had already mobilized with terrifying efficiency. They had found her LinkedIn profile, her Facebook page, her Instagram. They had posted pictures of her attending expensive wine tastings and country club luncheons, images she had curated to project an aura of wealthy elitism, now being weaponized against her to prove her classist arrogance. Look at her acting like she's old money. She makes $60,000 a year scanning boarding passes. The audacity to judge a billionaire in sweatpants when she's financing a leased BMW she can't afford without a roommate. Hope she enjoys the general public waiting room at the unemployment office. Her phone rang a loud, jarring sound that made her jump. It was her fiancé, Greg, a mid-level real estate broker who cared deeply about his public image. Greg. Brenda sobbed, answering the phone. "Greg, it's a nightmare. I need you to come get me. I don't think I can drive." "Brenda, what the hell is wrong with you?" Greg's voice was cold, completely devoid of the comfort she desperately sought. "My phone has been blowing up for an hour. My managing broker just called me. My clients are calling me. They saw the video, Brenda. Everyone saw it." "It's taken out of context," she pleaded, regurgitating the lie she was desperately trying to convince herself was true. "He was aggressive. He looked homeless. I was doing my job." "He's David Hayes. He's one of the most powerful black men in finance," Greg shouted through the phone. "You didn't just insult a passenger, you racially profiled a titan on camera. My firm deals with high net worth minority clients all over Manhattan. If I am associated with you right now, my career is dead. My broker literally told me to put out a statement distancing myself." Brenda's stomach plummeted into an endless dark abyss. "Greg, what are you saying? We're getting married in 4 months." "Not anymore," Greg said softly. The anger was gone, replaced by a ruthless self-preservation. "I'm going to my brother's place in Brooklyn. I'll send movers for my things tomorrow while you're out. Do not call me again." The line went dead. Brenda dropped the phone. The silence of the car was deafening. In less than 4 hours, she had lost her 14-year career, her pristine reputation, and her fiancé. The meticulously constructed, arrogant fantasy world she had lived in had been utterly vaporized by 3 minutes of unchecked bigotry. She was completely alone. 2 days later, the rain poured down on the streets of London, washing the ancient cobblestones outside the Hayes Capital European headquarters. Inside the expansive glass-walled conference room, David Hayes was standing at the head of a massive oak table, surrounded by his top analysts and the newly formed Apex Airlines Restructuring Committee. The Humanitarian Miles program is officially active, Richard Grayson announced, pulling up a presentation on the digital whiteboard. Frontline medical workers, teachers, and verified charity organizers now have access to a dedicated tier of lounge access and priority upgrades across the entire One World Alliance. We're calling it the Hayes Standard. David nodded approvingly. Good. We need to ensure that luxury is no longer exclusively synonymous with wealth. Respect is the new currency of this airline. Just then, Arthur Pendleton, who had barely survived the executive purge and was now working with the desperate, terrified efficiency of a man who knew he was on his last strike, hurried into the room. He was carrying a tablet. "Mr. Hayes," Arthur interrupted respectfully, "I apologize for the intrusion, but you need to see this. It's happening live on a morning broadcast in the States." Arthur placed the tablet on the oak table and unmuted the volume. The screen showed a popular nationally syndicated morning talk show. Sitting on the plush couches across from the veteran investigative journalist Sarah Jenkins was Brenda Carmichael. Brenda had undergone a massive calculated makeover. The severe, arrogant bun was gone, replaced by soft, sympathetic curls. The impeccably pressed, intimidating airline uniform had been swapped for a muted beige cardigan and minimal makeup. She looked frail, exhausted, and remarkably rehearsed. Sitting next to her was a man in a sharp suit, Maxwell Reed, a notorious crisis management publicist known for attempting to salvage the unsalvageable. "She hired a fixer," Richard scoffed, leaning in to watch. "She's trying to spin the narrative." On the screen, Sarah Jenkins leaned forward, her expression completely neutral. "Brenda, the video of your interaction with David Hayes has been viewed over 40 million times. The public backlash has been severe. Why did you decide to speak out today?" Brenda dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. "Because, Sarah, my life has been destroyed by a misunderstanding. I've received death threats. I lost my job, my fiancé, my peace of mind. Mr. Hayes is a very powerful, very intimidating man. When he approached my desk, he was aggressive. I was simply following the strict security protocols of Apex Airlines. I didn't know who he was, and frankly, wealth shouldn't excuse belligerent behavior. I am a victim of a billionaire's temper tantrum." Maxwell Reed nodded gravely beside her. "My client was a dedicated employee for 14 years. She was thrown under the bus by a corrupt corporate system, desperate to appease a wealthy investor. We are currently exploring our options for a wrongful termination lawsuit against Apex Airlines." In the London boardroom, Arthur gasped. Wrongful termination? She was caught on video violating a dozen federal anti-discrimination laws. David simply watched the screen, his eyes narrowed. "Wait for it. Jenkins is a real journalist. She doesn't do puff pieces." On the broadcast, Sarah Jenkins did not offer Brenda a sympathetic smile. Instead, she reached under the glass coffee table and pulled out a thick, heavy manila folder, placing it firmly in front of her. "That is a very compelling narrative, Brenda," Sarah Jenkins said, her voice dropping an octave into a tone of lethal professionalism. "And it might be believable if it weren't for the fact that yesterday afternoon, the new interim CEO of Apex Airlines, Winston Gallagher, authorized the unsealing of your complete human resources file in the interest of public transparency." Brenda's fake tears instantly vanished. Her posture stiffened. Maxwell Reed's eyes darted toward the folder, a flash of genuine panic crossing his face. "Bapri. Brenda, I have in front of me 12 separate documented complaints filed against you over the last decade." Sarah continued, opening the folder. "In 2018, you denied a Hispanic family entry to the lounge, claiming their passes were forged. They were not. In 2021, you called security on an Asian businessman because you claimed he was loitering near the first-class desk. He was a platinum member waiting for his wife. And in 2023, you explicitly told a black woman in a wheelchair that the VIP area was not a shelter." The color violently drained from Brenda's face. She looked like she had just been struck by a physical blow. Those were internal matters. They were resolved. The previous management cleared me of any wrongdoing, because the previous management was complicit in burying your blatant racial profiling to avoid lawsuits, Sarah Jenkins countered flawlessly. "But they are gone now, and the people you harassed are not." The camera cut away from Brenda and focused on the studio audience. Sitting in the front row were 3 people: the Hispanic father, the Asian businessman, and the black woman in the wheelchair. Brenda let out a small, terrified gasp. "These individuals have come forward since the video of you and Mr. Hayes went viral. Sarah said, looking directly into the camera. They recognized you, and they have just retained a prominent civil rights attorney to file a massive class action lawsuit against you personally for severe emotional distress and violation of the Civil Rights Act. Maxwell Reed, realizing his client had just lied to him and led him into a nationally televised slaughter, stood up abruptly. He didn't say a word. He unclipped his microphone, dropped it on the couch, and walked off the set while the cameras were still rolling. Max, where are you going?" Brenda cried out, her voice cracking in pure, unadulterated panic. She turned back to Sarah Jenkins, who was looking at her with an expression of absolute disgust. The camera zoomed in on Brenda's face, capturing the exact horrifying moment. She realized that there was no spin, no PR firm, and no lie that could save her from the monster she had created. In the London boardroom, David reached over and tapped the screen, turning off the tablet. "Arthur," David said calmly, "have our legal team reach out to that civil rights attorney. Let them know Hayes Capital will personally cover all their legal fees for the class action suit against Ms. Carmichael." Arthur swallowed hard, nodding vigorously. "Right away, Mr. Hayes, immediately." David walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the London skyline. The storm was finally breaking, giving way to the morning sun. Karma was no longer just a concept. It was a fully funded, legally binding reality. 8 months later, the sprawling concourse of John F. Kennedy International Airport was alive with the chaotic, kinetic energy of the holiday travel season. Thousands of passengers pulled suitcases, checked flight boards, and rushed toward security checkpoints. But at Terminal 4, the entrance to the newly rebranded Apex Zenith Lounge told a completely different story. The frosted glass walls and imposing marble reception desk of the past had been entirely demolished. In its place was an open, welcoming archway framed by warm oak wood and lush, living green walls. The lighting was bright but inviting. Standing behind a modern, accessible podium was Thomas, a young, cheerful gate agent wearing a sharp navy blue blazer with the new Apex insignia. He was chatting amiably with an elderly couple in comfortable sweatpants, scanning their digital passes with a warm smile. "Welcome to the Zenith Lounge, folks," Thomas said brightly. "Your humanitarian upgrade has been confirmed. We have hot soup in the dining area and private recliners in the back. Enjoy your layover." Standing near the entrance, watching the seamless interaction, were David and Chloe Hayes. David was dressed in a tailored yet comfortable dark navy sweater and slacks. Chloe held a coffee cup, her eyes scanning the new layout of the lounge. The transformation was absolute. The elitist, hostile environment Brenda Carmichael had cultivated for 14 years had been entirely eradicated. The staff was diverse. The patrons were a mix of business executives and frontline workers, and the air of arrogant exclusivity had been replaced by genuine world-class hospitality. "It looks incredible," Chloe murmured, leaning against David's shoulder. "Winston Gallagher really pulled through on the restructuring." "He did," David agreed, sipping his espresso. "Apex stock hit $65 a share this morning. Morale is up, customer satisfaction is the highest in the industry, and we're opening 3 more Zenith lounges in Tokyo, Paris, and Dubai next month." "And the class action suit?" Chloe asked softly. "Settled," David replied. "The victims received substantial compensation. As for the perpetrator, well, she's no longer our concern." Miles away from the polished oak and warm lighting of the Zenith Lounge, the harsh fluorescent lights of a budget bus terminal in central New Jersey flickered erratically. The air smelled of stale coffee diesel fuel and damp wool. Brenda Carmichael stood behind the scratched Formica counter of the terminal's only concession stand. She was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting polyester uniform, a stark departure from the tailored elegance of her past life. Her hair was pulled back into a messy, defeated ponytail, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. The legal fees from the civil rights lawsuit had completely bankrupted her. Without a job, and effectively blacklisted from the entire aviation and corporate hospitality industries, she had lost her leased luxury car and was evicted from her expensive apartment. She now lived in a tiny, cramped studio apartment, taking a 90-minute bus ride every morning to work the register at a transit hub that catered strictly to the very people she used to view with such profound disgust. "Hey, lady." Brenda flinched, pulling herself out of her exhausted daze. Standing on the other side of the counter was a towering man in dirty work boots and a stained high-visibility jacket. He slammed a crumpled $5 bill onto the counter. "I asked for a black coffee 10 minutes ago. You asleep back there?" The man barked, his tone dripping with impatience and disrespect. Brenda's jaw clenched. A phantom memory of her marble desk, her gold badge, and her absolute power flashed through her mind. She wanted to snap at him. She wanted to tell him that she used to deny entry to millionaires, that she used to be someone important, that he had no right to speak to her that way. But the words died in her throat. She looked down at the crumpled, dirty bill. She looked at the grimy coffee pot. She remembered the viral video, the live television ambush, the absolute destruction of her reality. She had no power here. She had no marble fortress to hide behind. She was exactly where she had put so many others, at the mercy of someone else's arrogance. I'm sorry, sir," Brenda whispered, her voice devoid of any fight. She grabbed a styrofoam cup with trembling hands and began to pour the stale coffee. "Coming right up." Back at JFK, David Hayes watched his daughter Lily run up to the newly installed lounge welcome desk. She handed Thomas, the cheerful agent, a small hand-drawn picture of an airplane. "For you," Lily beamed. Thomas laughed, genuinely delighted, and pinned the drawing to the corkboard behind his podium. "Thank you, Lily. That's the best plane I've seen all day." David smiled, a deep sense of profound satisfaction washing over him. He reached for Chloe's hand, their fingers intertwining. They had taken a moment of ugly, hateful prejudice and turned it into a masterclass in accountability. They had torn down a monument to arrogance and built a system based on respect in its place. Money talks, but actions echo. And the echo David Hayes had created would ensure that no one in his presence would ever be judged by the cover of their book again. "Come on," David said, leading his family toward the boarding gates. "Let's go home." What an incredible journey from arrogant bigotry to ultimate devastating karma. David Hayes proved that true power doesn't need to scream. It only needs to act. Brenda learned the hard way that the very people you look down upon might just hold the keys to your entire universe. Did you find this story of instant justice as satisfying as we did? Drop a comment below with your thoughts on David's brilliant revenge. If you love this video, smash that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more epic real-life drama stories. See you next time.